Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. The President of the General Assembly, Honorable Deputy Minister, Foreign Affairs and Regional Integration, the Chief Executive Officer of LifeLink, the Secretary General, the Administrator of Administration, Director of Administration, the National Youth Authority, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. It is my honor and privilege to address this annual gathering of young people from across the sub-region who are poised to tackle over the coming days complex issues of global significance through dialogue and diplomacy. The concept of a model United Nations goes to the heart of the mandate of the National Youth Authority to develop the capacity of the Ghanaian youth to enable them partake in decision-making at all levels. I am therefore grateful to LifeLink Friendship Schools and its partners for providing the framework under which Ghanaian and West African youth can hone their research, speaking, debating, writing, critical thinking, and leadership skills. The young people who will acquire these skills today would inevitably lead the charge in how our sub-region will relate to the rest of the world tomorrow. President of Assembly, I've just been advised that my successor as Deputy Minister for Information, the Honorable Fatimatu Abubakar, is a product and an alumnus of this project. I therefore remain hopeful that in the coming days, we shall see many more of our delegates take the mantle of leadership and report to duty as policy shapers and decision makers. President, on July 23rd, in 1851, diplomats and physicians from 12 Eurasian powers assembled in Paris to chart a common approach to the pressing medical issues of their time. The first international sanitary conference, as we have come to know them, set the pace for international collaboration in the wake of global crisis and were instrumental in the eventual formation of the World Health Organization, WHO. Today, as the world grapples with the evolving health, economic, and social ramifications of COVID-19, the need for international collaboration in researching, manufacturing, and distribution of vaccines has become apparent, and the charge to forge a global response to this global pandemic remains crucial today as it did 170 years ago in Paris. Madam President, I understand that the structure of this model UN will allow for 4 committees of the UN: WHO, the Economic and Financial Committee, the Human Rights Council, and the Disarmament and International Security Committee to ruminate on topics related to the theme partnership, a global response to a global pandemic. I must say that I find the selection of these committees to be apt as they particularly reflect the health, human rights, security, and economic challenges that have been occasioned and exacerbated by the pandemic. The focus of these committees can foster actionable responses from the delegates that policymakers can use to resolve the real crises in these sectors that have emerged as a result of the pandemic. I further urge delegates on the various committees to take a special notice of the African dimension to the team in the drafting of their policy papers and arguments. Far too often, African perspectives are resigned to the margins of international discourse, and our problems an afterthought to the concerns of the global north. To take special notice of the African dimension, therefore, is to engage your creative faculties to produce policies and narratives that reflect an African that has come into his own and is ready to participate at the international stage, not as pawns, but as agents, not as mensidants, but as merchants. Madam President, to take the African dimension into consideration in health within this pandemic era is to realize the vision of the World Health Organization, which, in the words of its Director General, Dr. Tedros, is not health for some, is not health for most, it is health for all. The advent of the pandemic underlined the need for international collaboration in health, as countries realized that the ties that bound us in trade and norm also made us collectively vulnerable to COVID-19. With this understanding, we saw an unprecedented level of knowledge and experience sharing amongst public health professionals from all parts of the globe, with our very own Noguchi Memorial Institute successfully sequencing genomes of the virus and sharing the sequence data with scientists across the world via the open GISAID database. Yet, the problem of vaccine equity threatens to undo the global collaboration that was seen in the early days of the pandemic. It is becoming increasingly clear that vaccine donations alone will not be sufficient to reconcile the deficit in vaccines, particularly in our part of the world. If we are to fulfill the promise of not leaving anyone behind, then Africa needs a boost in its manufacturing capabilities. The selection of Ghana by the European Union, and credit to His Excellency President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, as a manufacturing hub for vaccines earlier this year, is therefore a welcome prospect in this regard. Delegates, your challenge is to create policies and put forward arguments that challenge the legal, technical, and political hindrances to manufacturing of COVID-19 vaccines on the continent. Madam President, the mandate of the United Nations General Assembly Second Committee concerns global finance and economy under 11 thematic clusters. The pandemic caused an overwhelming disruption on global economic activity. Ghana and Africa were not spared in the fallout. Lockdowns and other social distancing measures resulted in reduced working hours and earnings. The effects of the pandemic were especially pronounced and profound in the lives of workers in the informal sector, who form the majority of our labor force, as their ability to earn on a daily basis was severely hampered by the reduced economic activity. Continentally, the World Bank reports that Sub-Saharan Africa suffered a GDP annual growth rate of negative 2.4%. Effectively, many struggling young Africans were plunged into poverty and extreme poverty by virtue of the pandemic. And Oxfam predicts that it could take some countries more than a decade for the world's poorest to recover from the economic effects of the pandemic. As delegates on the Economic and Financial Committee, your charge is to advocate policies that leverage on global partnerships and new technologies to eradicate poverty and foster sustainable development, especially in the area of agriculture, which is not only one of the most important sectors in the Ghanaian economy, but also forms one of the thematic areas of the second committee. Madam President, the delegates on the Human Rights Council will similarly have their hands full as the pandemic brought to the fore a number of serious human rights issues globally and also within the country Ghana. In Ghana and elsewhere, the announcement of COVID-19 restrictions sparked lively discussions about executive overreach, the nature of individual rights within the public health crisis, the rise to livelihood, amongst others. I look forward to the diverse arguments that will be presented in this regard. Regrettably, from the protest against police brutality following the unfortunate death of George Floyd in the United States to alarming spikes in intimate partner violence within the sub-region, the wake of the pandemic recorded substantial deprivations, violations, denials, and abuses of human rights across the globe by state and non-state actors, with young people on both sides of the spectrum as both perpetrators and victims. Your task, therefore, is to develop policies and mechanisms that boost the promotion and monitoring of human rights globally, and specifically counter incessant negative narratives that seek to place Africa outside the scope of human rights protections. Finally, the mandate of the Disarmament and International Security Committee, DISEC, is to oversee disarmament of several types of weapons from both state and non-state actors. DISEC is also responsible for dealing with matters of international security. While the lockdowns in the early part of the pandemic led to a reduction in homicides and violent crime globally, these positive effects of the lockdown were slowly reversed as social distancing measures were weaned off. Delegates on this committee must navigate complex geopolitical developments and address how they impact global security, from the heightened use of improvised explosive device in Afghanistan in the lead up to the departure of the United States from that country, to the proliferation of small and light weapons, which continue to be a major concern within West Africa. Delegates must come up with creative solutions to some of the most challenging global security issues of our generation. Whilst our delegates will approach these pressing global issues from the viewpoints of different countries in the coming days, it is of paramount importance that our delegates never lose sight of the fact that we all belong to one common human family. We must sow the seeds today for a new era of international relations and diplomacy, marked by the pursuance of mutual interests and mutual respect. For if there is a silver lining to the brooding cloud of the coronavirus pandemic, it is the knowledge that our fate as human species, our fate as mere mortals, our fate as human beings, regardless of national and tribal attachment, religious sensibilities, and economic and social variance, is inextricably linked. That one virus from Wuhan in China can affect the whole world and destroy economies underlines the fact that as human beings, our destinies, our future are inextricably linked. I thank you for this opportunity, and I hope this conference will not only provide for the nourishment of these eager young delegates, but also provides innovative solutions to the challenges that the world is plagued with. I thank you.